The morning sun streamed through the tall windows of the small, bustling cafe. The place was alive with the sounds of laughter, clinking cups, and the soft hum of conversation. The smell of fresh coffee and baked bread filled the air, giving the space a warm, inviting feeling. People sat in small groups, some chatting, others quietly reading or working on laptops. It was one of those ordinary mornings that felt peaceful and familiar. Among the crowd, a young boy sat at a corner table with his father. The father was a man who carried an air of success. His clothes were neat and expensive, his watch gleamed in the morning light, and his phone rested beside his cup of coffee, ready for the next call or message. He was used to the fast pace of life, to meetings, deals, and decisions that often left him distracted from the smaller, quieter moments around him. Today, however, he had brought his son along, wanting to spend a few hours together away from the usual rush. But even here, in this calm cafe, he found himself checking emails and glancing at his phone more than he wanted. The boy was smaller than most children his age. His legs didn't move as easily as others, and his hands often trembled slightly. These were things his father knew well, but tried to shield himself from thinking about too much. He wanted his son to grow up strong and confident, but he also knew that life had already handed him some challenges. Still, the boy had a quiet curiosity in his eyes, a gentle spirit that noticed the details of the world around him. He looked at the other children and adults moving with ease, feeling a mixture of admiration and a little hesitation. He wished he could join in the games, the laughter, the little dances that seemed so natural to everyone else. Behind the counter, a young waitress moved gracefully between tables, carrying plates of food and cups of coffee. She smiled at each person she served, making eye contact, listening carefully to their orders, and sometimes chatting with them in a way that made them feel seen. She had a presence that was warm and steady, a quiet energy that made the cafe feel alive without being overwhelming. People often noticed her kindness even if they didn't know her name. She seemed to have a natural way of connecting with everyone she met, especially children. The boy's eyes kept wandering to a small area near the middle of the cafe. There, a group of children and adults had gathered around a small demonstration of dance steps. The music was soft but lively, and the children tried to copy the movements. The boy watched intently, his small hands clenching slightly with a mix of excitement and nervousness. He wanted to join, to move with the music, but the uncertainty of his legs and the fear of falling made him hesitate. He felt a little apart from the fun, wishing he could just be part of it for a moment. The waitress noticed him. She had a way of seeing people that went beyond just taking orders. She saw his interest, his hesitation, and the tiny flicker of hope in his eyes. Without saying anything at first, she moved closer to him, crouching down so that her eyes were level with his. She smiled softly and extended her hand as if to say it was okay, that she was there to help. Her presence alone seemed to ease some of the tension in his small body. The father glanced up from his phone and noticed the exchange. At first, he didn't pay much attention, assuming it was just a polite gesture, but then he saw the boy's face light up. There was something in the way he leaned forward slightly, the way his eyes followed the waitress's movements, that caught the father off guard. He hadn't realized how much his son wanted to engage, how much he longed for someone to guide him and encourage him gently. It stirred something deep inside the father, a mix of admiration, gratitude, and a sudden awareness of how much he had been absent in these small, quiet moments of his son's life. The waitress began to guide the boy slowly, showing him how to move one foot, then the other, matching the rhythm of the music. She used her hands carefully to support him when he wobbled, and she kept her voice soft and encouraging. Every step was deliberate but gentle, making sure he felt safe and confident. The boy's initial hesitation started to melt away, replaced by a tentative joy that he hadn't shown before in public. He laughed softly when he managed a small turn, and the sound was like a tiny bell ringing in the father's heart. It was a sound he realized he hadn't heard enough, a reminder of the pure, simple happiness that could exist in a single moment. Other patrons in the cafe began to notice the interaction. Some smiled quietly, touched by the scene. The father, still holding his phone, set it down slowly, realizing that this moment was more important than any message or call. He watched as the waitress continued to guide his son, her patience unwavering, her encouragement genuine. There was no rush, no judgment, just a shared understanding between the two of them that this was a space for learning, for trying, for feeling proud of small achievements. As the music played on, the boy began to move more confidently. He could feel the rhythm in his body, and though his steps were not perfect, he kept trying. The waitress clapped softly every time he completed a movement, celebrating his effort more than the result. The father felt a lump in his throat. He realized that this simple act of kindness, this patience and attention from someone who didn't even know them, was something he had overlooked in his own life. He thought about how much he had focused on work, on success, on money, and how little he had focused on being present for these fleeting, beautiful moments with his son. The waitress continued to guide him for a few more minutes, her eyes filled with encouragement. She didn't push, she didn't rush, she simply offered support. The boy's laughter grew louder, more confident, and he even attempted a small spin with her help. The father reached out, placing a hand gently on his son's shoulder, feeling a connection that had been missing in the daily rush of life. He whispered a soft word of encouragement, feeling the warmth of the moment and the importance of being there, truly there, for his child. Time seemed to stretch in the cafe. The usual hum of conversation and clinking of cups faded slightly in the father's awareness as he focused on his son. He noticed how the waitress had no pretension, no need to impress anyone, yet her impact was profound. She had taken a small moment, a simple act of guidance, and turned it into something transformative. The father couldn't help but reflect on how many such moments he had missed, how many times he had overlooked the quiet acts of love and patience in life. Eventually, the music ended, and the demonstration concluded. The boy stood, a little out of breath, a little unsteady, but with a bright smile on his face. He looked up at the waitress and gave her a shy but heartfelt thank you. She nodded, smiling back, and returned to her duties behind the counter, carrying on as if nothing extraordinary had happened. But for the father and his son, something extraordinary had happened. A seed had been planted, a small, simple, human connection that reminded them of the importance of patience, encouragement, and genuine presence. The father bent down slightly, ruffling his son's hair gently. "You did really well," he said softly. The boy's smile widened and he nodded, feeling proud of himself in a way he hadn't before. For a few minutes, the weight of life's responsibilities seemed to lift, replaced by the quiet joy of shared moments and new discoveries. The father realized that while he could provide comfort, security, and material needs, what his son craved most was attention, presence, and encouragement, something that money alone could never buy. As they left the cafe, the father held his son's hand a little tighter. He glanced back once at the waitress, who was now serving another table with the same warmth and care, and he felt a profound gratitude. In that brief encounter, he had witnessed not just kindness, but the way small gestures could transform confidence, bring joy, and create lasting memories. He promised himself silently to be more present, to notice these moments, and to allow his son to feel proud, capable, and loved in ways he hadn't always realized before. The morning continued, but for the father and his son, the day had already changed. Something inside them had shifted, sparked by the gentle guidance of a woman who simply saw a child and chose to help. It was a reminder that sometimes life's most valuable lessons come not from grand gestures or wealth, but from quiet, compassionate acts that touch the heart and leave a mark that lasts far beyond a single moment. The next day, the father decided to take his son to the cafe again. The boy had been talking about the small dance demonstration nonstop since the previous morning. His excitement was obvious. He had felt a spark of confidence he hadn't felt before. The father, too, felt a quiet anticipation. He wanted to see that light return to his son's eyes and maybe, in the process, learn something new about patience, kindness, and the beauty of small moments. When they entered the cafe, the atmosphere was alive as before. The smell of fresh coffee, baked pastries, and the faint scent of flowers from the nearby window created a sense of warmth that instantly relaxed them. The boy's eyes searched the room and they lit up when he spotted the waitress moving among the tables with her characteristic ease. She noticed him immediately, waving gently and smiling in recognition. The boy waved back shyly, and the father felt a subtle thrill at seeing his son so eager and happy. The waitress approached their table with her usual warmth. She knelt down slightly to be at the boy's level and asked him softly if he remembered the steps they had tried the day before. His nod and eager smile were answered with gentle encouragement. She suggested they try something slightly more challenging today, something to push him just a little beyond what he thought he could do. The boy hesitated for a moment, a flicker of nervousness crossing his face, but the trust he had begun to build in her presence overrode his fear. He nodded again, gripping the edge of the table before carefully standing. The father watched quietly from his chair, noticing every detail. The waitress didn't rush. She guided his son patiently, using her hands only when absolutely necessary. She spoke softly, explaining each step in words that were clear and simple. The boy mirrored her movements, attempting a small twirl, then a step forward, then back. Each time he wobbled, she steadied him gently and smiled, reinforcing that mistakes were okay. The father felt an unfamiliar sensation, a mixture of pride and humility. He realized that this moment of simple guidance and trust was more powerful than any lesson he could have given himself. Other patrons in the cafe started to take notice. A few quietly clapped, some smiled encouragingly, and a few even recorded short videos on their phones. But the boy remained focused on the dance and the gentle guidance of the waitress. The father saw something remarkable. His son's face, usually tinged with hesitation or shyness, now glowing with determination and joy. There was a spark in his eyes that the father had rarely seen, a confidence he hadn't realized could be ignited so easily. The waitress continued with calm, deliberate encouragement. "Step to the side, then spin slowly," she said softly, demonstrating with her own body. The boy followed, initially struggling but gradually matching her movements. She clapped gently for each correct step, never making him feel pressured, always celebrating the effort over perfection. The father found himself leaning forward, silently urging his son, feeling a warmth he couldn't have predicted. He had watched his son stumble and hesitate for years, but this was different. Here, with someone else's patience and guidance, his son was beginning to believe in himself. The father began reflecting on his own life as he watched. His work, his business, his endless meetings, it had all been about results, numbers, and schedules. He had forgotten how small acts of encouragement and connection could create lasting change. He realized that he had often underestimated the impact of human kindness, assuming that his son's growth depended only on structured lessons or professional care. But here, in the soft music of the cafe and the careful, patient instruction of a young waitress, he saw a lesson he could never have bought with money: the power of belief, encouragement, and gentle guidance. The boy's confidence grew with each step. He even attempted a small spin without holding the waitress's hand, wobbling slightly but regaining balance. His laughter echoed in the cafe, bright and pure, and the father felt a lump in his throat. It was a sound that seemed to carry all the joy and pride he had ever hoped to hear. For a brief moment, he forgot the business deals waiting for him, the phone calls, the obligations. All that mattered was this moment of connection, trust, and achievement. Seeing his son succeed, the father couldn't resist joining in, though in his own way. He clapped softly, encouragingly, and whispered words of praise. His son looked up at him with shining eyes, proud and exhilarated. The father realized something important. He had been so focused on providing material comfort and opportunities that he had overlooked the importance of being truly present, of noticing and of celebrating small victories. He had assumed his presence alone was enough. But this experience showed him that active encouragement and attention could ignite confidence in ways nothing else could. The waitress, noticing the father's gaze and quiet involvement, smiled subtly, as if acknowledging the silent lesson unfolding. She had no idea of the larger impact she was having, yet her actions were already creating change. The father felt a deep gratitude, realizing that sometimes the most important teachers in life are those we meet unexpectedly, in ordinary places, performing simple acts of kindness. As the music continued, the boy became more adventurous. He tried a few steps that were more complicated, guided by the waitress's steady instructions. Each time he faltered, she was there to support, never judging, never rushing. The father marveled at her patience and skill, noticing the way she treated his son with dignity, respect, and gentle encouragement. It was a lesson in humanity he had rarely experienced in the corporate world. A reminder that success measured in wealth and status meant little if it could not be paired with kindness and empathy. Other children in the cafe noticed the boy's success and began to approach him, asking questions and offering encouragement. The boy responded with shy smiles, but now he held his head higher, no longer entirely withdrawn. He was beginning to feel part of something larger, a sense of inclusion that had been missing before. The father's heart swelled. He had watched his son struggle, doubt himself, and withdraw in public. But today he saw a glimpse of a future where fear did not define him, where confidence and joy could take root, nurtured by patience, guidance, and human connection. The waitress's influence extended beyond the dance steps themselves. She offered encouragement, smiled at every small success, and treated each movement as significant. She didn't need recognition. Her joy came from seeing others succeed, from sharing moments of confidence and happiness. The father watched her, silently realizing that he had much to learn about true leadership, about nurturing growth, and about the importance of celebrating effort rather than results. He felt a shift within himself, a gentle but unmistakable awareness that life's most valuable lessons often came from unexpected sources. Time seemed to slow as they continued. The boy's small victories accumulated, each step a triumph, each turn a testament to growing confidence. The father noticed that his own perspective was changing. He had always been in control, orchestrating life with precision. Yet he now saw the power in allowing someone else's patience and skill to guide his child. There was humility in that, a recognition that real success involved listening, observing, and valuing small, meaningful interactions. By the time the music ended, the boy was glowing with happiness. He had learned more than steps. He had learned the joy of trying, the value of patience, and the strength that came from encouragement. The father approached, kneeling beside him, feeling a profound sense of pride and gratitude. He whispered words of love and praise, realizing that these were the moments that would shape his son's confidence and self-belief far more than any structured lesson or professional intervention. The waitress returned to her duties, unaware of the ripple effect her actions had created. She smiled briefly at the father and son and then moved on, serving other patrons with the same quiet grace. The father's heart remained full, reflecting on the lessons of the morning. He understood now that success in life wasn't measured in wealth or power alone, but in the ability to nurture, encourage, and be present for those who depended on you, especially your children. As they left the cafe, the father held his son's hand tightly, feeling a renewed connection. He had seen the transformative power of encouragement and presence, witnessed in the simple act of guiding someone through a small dance step. He vowed silently to carry this lesson into every aspect of his life, to notice, to encourage, and to be truly present. He knew that the bond he had strengthened today would be a foundation for his son's confidence and happiness, a reminder that the smallest acts could create the largest changes. Walking out into the sunlight, the father and son shared smiles and laughter. The boy hummed the tune of the music they had danced to, his small steps mimicking the movements he had learned. The father felt an unfamiliar but welcome lightness in his chest. He realized that change didn't always come from grand gestures or monumental decisions. Sometimes it came from quiet, consistent acts of kindness, patience, and human connection. He carried that lesson with him, knowing it would guide not only his relationship with his son but also his approach to life itself. In the days that followed, the father found himself noticing moments he would have ignored before, paying attention to small acts of kindness, the subtle joys in his son's life, and the lessons that could be learned from those around him. The memory of the waitress and her patient guidance remained vivid, a reminder of how simple acts could ripple outward, changing hearts, attitudes, and even lives. The father understood now that wealth and success were hollow without compassion and presence, and he felt a determination to live differently, to be the kind of parent and person who nurtured, encouraged, and valued human connection above all else. The days that followed felt different for the father. His mornings no longer began with long lists of calls and meetings. Instead, he started taking quiet moments with his son, sharing breakfast, walking together, or simply talking. It wasn't easy for him to slow down at first. His mind still buzzed with thoughts of business deals and deadlines, but each time he saw his son smile, he felt reminded of what really mattered. The boy's happiness had become a kind of light in his life, something that softened the noise of the outside world. A few days later, the father decided to take his son back to the cafe. It had become a special place for them now, filled with small but meaningful memories. As they entered, the familiar sounds of cups clinking and soft music playing welcomed them. The boy's eyes scanned the room eagerly, searching for the waitress. When he saw her, his face brightened and she waved in return, just as warm and genuine as before. The father noticed that simple exchange and felt something shift again inside him. He realized how rare true kindness was and how powerful it could be. They sat at their usual table by the window. The waitress came over, bringing water and a cheerful smile. She greeted them both and asked the boy how his dancing was going. His shy grin spoke volumes. He told her he had been practicing at home, even though his steps were still not perfect. The waitress nodded, telling him that perfection didn't matter. It was the trying that made all the difference. The father listened quietly, thinking about how many times he had chased perfection in his own life, forgetting the joy of simply trying. After serving a few other customers, the waitress returned with 2 small pastries for the boy, saying they were a treat for his hard work. The father offered to pay, but she shook her head, smiling. "He earned it," she said softly. The father smiled back, touched by her thoughtfulness. There was something special in her simplicity. She didn't treat his son differently, didn't show pity, only kindness and respect. It made the father realize how much his son needed that kind of acceptance from the world. Later that morning, a small group of people gathered again for another casual dance demonstration. The same soft music began to fill the cafe, and the waitress looked at the boy with an inviting smile. "Want to try again?" she asked. The boy hesitated, glancing at his father for reassurance. This time, instead of watching from his chair, the father stood up. "Let's both try," he said gently. The boy's eyes widened in surprise, then lit up with excitement. The waitress laughed softly, guiding them both to the open space. The father felt awkward at first. He hadn't danced in years. But the moment wasn't about skill. It was about connection. The waitress showed a few simple moves, demonstrating slowly. The boy followed her steps, and the father did his best to keep up, though his movements were clumsy. Laughter filled the space as the 3 of them moved to the rhythm. The father hadn't laughed like this in a long time. For once, he wasn't the serious businessman or the perfectionist father. He was simply a man sharing joy with his son. People around the cafe clapped softly, smiling at the scene. It wasn't a performance, but it felt like one of those rare, beautiful moments that reminded everyone watching of life's simple beauty. The waitress's patience, the boy's determination, and the father's rediscovered joy all blended into something heartwarming. When the song ended, the boy leaned against his father, laughing breathlessly. The father hugged him gently, feeling a sense of peace that was unfamiliar but deeply comforting. After they sat back down, the father found himself thinking deeply. He realized how much his son had changed in just a few days, not physically but emotionally. He was more confident, more willing to try. The father knew that this transformation wasn't because of doctors, therapy, or anything he had arranged. It came from kindness, patience, and encouragement, the kind shown by a person who didn't even know them well. He wondered how many people lived their lives unaware of the power they had to lift others through small acts of care. The waitress came by to check on them again, asking the boy if he had fun. He nodded eagerly. She smiled, saying he was improving fast. Then she turned to the father and said quietly, "He's a brave kid. You must be proud." The father's throat tightened. He nodded, unable to find words. Her sincerity touched him deeply. He realized that being proud wasn't just about achievements. It was about resilience, courage, and effort. Things his son had in abundance. As they finished their meal, the father found himself wanting to learn more about the waitress. She seemed wise beyond her years, someone who carried warmth that couldn't be taught. But he didn't want to intrude, so he simply thanked her sincerely for helping his son. She brushed it off modestly, saying she was just doing what anyone should. Her words lingered with him. He thought about how few people truly lived that way, helping without expecting anything in return. When they left the cafe, the father noticed his son walking with a little more confidence. He still held his father's hand, but there was a new steadiness in his steps. The father watched him carefully, realizing how much a single person's kindness had changed his child's outlook. He wanted to carry that same spirit into his own life, to slow down, to listen, and to give others the same kind of attention that the waitress had shown. That evening, as they sat at home, the boy asked if they could go dancing again someday. The father smiled and promised they would. But something deeper was forming in his mind. He wanted to do more than just visit the cafe. He wanted to bring that same sense of connection and encouragement into their daily lives. He began to think about organizing small activities for children like his son, safe, inclusive spaces where they could learn, move and build confidence. The idea felt new, but it filled him with a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in years. Over the next few days, he couldn't stop thinking about it. His business meetings began to feel different. He listened more to people, paid attention to their stories, and treated his employees with more understanding. He realized that leadership wasn't only about control or authority, it was also about empathy. The lesson he had learned in that small cafe had begun to transform how he saw everything. The next weekend, he and his son returned to the cafe once more. By now, they were familiar faces, greeted warmly by the staff and a few regular customers. The waitress seemed genuinely happy to see them. She asked how they had been, and the father told her about the small dance sessions he was planning to organize for children with disabilities. Her eyes lit up with surprise and admiration. She said it was a wonderful idea and offered to help if he ever needed volunteers. The father was touched by her willingness to give her time so freely. As the morning went on, more people joined the small dance area. The boy, now more confident, danced with other children, sharing smiles and laughter. The father watched, his heart full. He knew he was witnessing something far more important than money or status. He saw community, compassion, and the kind of joy that came from connection. It wasn't about what people had. It was about how they treated one another. Later, as the cafe began to quiet down, the father found a moment to thank the waitress again. He told her how much her kindness had changed not only his son but also him. She smiled softly, shaking her head as if it wasn't a big deal, but he insisted. "You reminded me of something I'd forgotten," he said. "That the smallest acts of kindness can change a life." Her smile widened, but her voice remained humble. "Sometimes people just need to be seen," she said. "That's all it takes." The simplicity of her words hit him deeply. He realized that for years he had been surrounded by people but hadn't truly seen them. Not his employees, not even his own son. He had been too focused on the next goal to notice the beauty of small present moments. That night, the father couldn't stop thinking about everything that had happened. The laughter in the cafe, the joy on his son's face, and the words of the waitress all stayed with him. He sat on his balcony watching the city lights and felt a sense of peace that was new to him. He understood now that life's true success wasn't in the wealth he had built, but in the lives he could touch, the kindness he could give, and the love he could nurture. From that day forward, he began to live differently. His work continued, but his priorities shifted. He spent more time with his son, encouraged him, and supported his interests. Together, they visited the cafe often, not just for the food or the music, but for the warmth and humanity they found there. The waitress continued to be a quiet inspiration in their lives, a reminder that compassion, when shared, could ripple far beyond a single moment. And so, the simple act of a young woman helping a child through a dance step became something far greater. It changed the course of a father's life, strengthened a bond between parent and child, and sparked a chain of kindness that reached further than any of them could have imagined. It was a reminder that real change often begins in the quietest moments, with the simplest gestures and the purest intentions. The morning air was calm and clear when the father woke up earlier than usual. He stood by the window of his large house looking out at the quiet street below. Life had begun to feel different lately. The noise of business, the pressure of meetings, and the constant chase for success no longer carried the same importance they once did. What filled his thoughts now were small moments: his son's laughter, the sound of music in the cafe, and the kindness of a woman who had unknowingly changed the course of his life. It amazed him how a single encounter could shift so much inside a person. His son soon woke up and joined him at the window. The boy's face was brighter these days, his steps more confident. The transformation had been slow but steady. Each time he danced, each time he was encouraged, something inside him grew stronger. The father smiled and asked if he wanted to visit the cafe again. The boy nodded eagerly. It had become their favorite place, not just for coffee or pastries, but because it felt like home in a way few other places did. When they arrived, the cafe was busier than usual. People chatted happily and music played softly in the background. The waitress was there, moving gracefully as always, balancing plates and cups with ease. She noticed them as soon as they walked in, and her smile widened in recognition. The boy waved, and she waved back warmly before hurrying over to greet them. The father thanked her for everything she had done for his son. He told her that because of her patience and kindness, his son had found new confidence. She listened quietly, her expression humble as if she didn't see her actions as anything special. "He did it himself," she said gently. "I just helped him believe he could." Her words stayed with the father long after she walked away to serve another table. As they enjoyed their breakfast, the father noticed a young couple sitting nearby with their little daughter. The girl was trying to take her first steps but kept stumbling. The father watched as the mother laughed gently, encouraging her daughter with outstretched arms. It reminded him of his own son's journey, the fear, the hesitation, and the courage it took to keep trying. He thought about how easily he could have missed these beautiful lessons if he had continued living distracted by work and wealth. Later, when the music began again for another small dance session, the waitress gestured toward the boy, inviting him to join. This time the father didn't hesitate either. He stood up, took his son's hand, and joined in the dance area. A few other people followed, turning the space into a circle of laughter and movement. The waitress guided them all, her energy full of warmth and calm. The boy's steps were smoother now. His movements carried confidence and rhythm. The father couldn't stop smiling as he watched him move freely, no longer bound by the fear that used to hold him back. As the music flowed, the father's thoughts wandered to the past. He remembered the early days when he was too busy to notice the small things, the missed school events, the quick goodbyes before rushing to meetings, the way his son's eyes would quietly search for his attention. He felt a twinge of guilt, but it wasn't heavy anymore. It was more of a gentle reminder, a nudge that told him he had a second chance now and he was making the most of it. When the music stopped, applause filled the cafe. The waitress clapped for everyone, especially for the boy who stood proudly, breathing hard but smiling from ear to ear. The father knelt beside him, praising him for how well he had done. The boy beamed, his eyes shining with joy and pride. That moment alone made every change, every decision to slow down, worth it. After the crowd dispersed, the father found himself talking to the waitress again. They stood near the counter discussing how dance could be more than just movement, how it could build confidence, joy, and connection. The father told her about his plan to start community sessions for children with disabilities, a safe space where they could dance, learn, and grow. The waitress listened with genuine interest, her eyes lighting up. "That's a beautiful idea," she said. "If you ever need help, I'd be happy to volunteer." The father felt touched. There was something remarkable about how natural her kindness was. She didn't do things for recognition or praise. She did them because she cared. It made him think about how rare it was to meet people like her in a world that often moved too fast to notice small kindnesses. Over the next few weeks, the father's idea began to take shape. He used his resources to rent a small studio space not far from the cafe. He hired a few dance instructors who specialized in working with children, but he made sure to keep the environment warm, open, and friendly. He wanted it to feel like the cafe, a place of acceptance and encouragement. He invited the waitress to the opening event, insisting that she was the inspiration behind it all. On the day of the opening, the studio was filled with children and parents. The atmosphere buzzed with excitement and nervous energy. The father stood beside his son, watching as children of different abilities began to explore the space, moving to the rhythm of music. The waitress arrived a little late, her face lighting up when she saw what the father had created. She clapped her hands together in delight, clearly moved by the sight. When the music started, the father gave a small speech. He didn't talk about business or money. He spoke about kindness, courage, and the power of human connection. He shared how one act of compassion had changed his and his son's lives forever. The crowd listened quietly, many wiping tears from their eyes. The waitress stood in the back, her eyes glistening, humbled by the unexpected acknowledgement. After the speech, the children began dancing. Some moved freely, others carefully, but all were smiling. The father watched with pride as his son took the lead, helping another child with the steps just as the waitress had once helped him. The sight was almost too beautiful to take in. The father turned to the waitress and whispered, "You see? It's all because of you." She shook her head, smiling softly. "No," she said. "It's because you chose to see what really matters." The father thought about those words all day. They summed up everything he had learned in recent months. That change doesn't come from wealth or status, but from awareness, from choosing to slow down and see people for who they are. He realized how many lives he had the power to touch simply by being more present and compassionate. The dance studio quickly became a success, not because of money or publicity, but because of the joy it brought to people's lives. Parents came to watch their children move and grow in confidence. The father visited often, sometimes to help, sometimes just to observe. Each visit reminded him that the best kind of success came from giving, from lifting others rather than climbing higher alone. The waitress continued working at the cafe but often stopped by the studio on her days off. She helped with organizing events and even learned a few simple dance steps herself. She and the father developed a quiet friendship built on respect and shared values. Their conversations were never about wealth or success, but about people, kindness, and how small actions could ripple through lives in ways no one could predict. One evening, after a long day of classes, the father and his son walked home together. The boy talked endlessly about his new friends at the studio, his favorite songs, and the moves he wanted to learn next. The father listened with a full heart, realizing how far they had both come. There was a time when his son had been afraid to step onto a dance floor, unsure of his place in the world. Now he was leading others, teaching them to believe in themselves the way someone had once believed in him. That night, the father sat quietly on the porch after his son went to bed. The air was cool and the stars shimmered faintly above. He thought about the waitress, the cafe, the dance, and all the moments that had led him here. Life had taken on a new meaning, one filled with purpose, gratitude, and connection. He had learned that wealth meant nothing without humanity, and that true richness came from love, compassion, and the ability to see beauty in the simplest things. Weeks passed, but the lessons never faded. The father's life had slowed down, yet it felt fuller than ever. His son's laughter echoed through their home, his joy contagious and pure. The cafe remained a place of comfort and inspiration, a symbol of where everything had begun. And every time the father saw the waitress, he felt an unspoken understanding between them, a shared knowledge that one small act of kindness could truly change the world. What had started as a simple dance step had turned into something far greater, a dance of life, of courage, of human connection. The father knew he would never forget the moment he saw his son guided through that first step. It was the moment everything changed, not just for his son, but for him too. Months had passed since the dance studio had opened, and the little community that had formed around it had grown stronger every week. The father couldn't help but smile each time he walked through the doors. Children laughed as they moved across the floor. Parents clapped in rhythm, and the sound of music filled the space with warmth. There was life here, real, joyful life, and it reminded him daily of how far he and his son had come. His son had become one of the most confident children in the group. The same boy who once stood shy and uncertain now moved with energy and joy, encouraging others to join him. He had found something beautiful through dance, a sense of belonging. The father often sat at the back of the room, watching him with quiet pride. Every step, every smile, every laugh reminded him that this was what truly mattered. One evening, as the class ended, the father noticed the waitress standing near the doorway. She had come to watch, as she sometimes did, still in her cafe uniform, her hair tied neatly back. When she caught his eye, she smiled softly. "They're amazing," she said. "Look how happy they are. The F.E." Heather nodded, feeling gratitude wash over him again. "It's all because of you," he said. She shook her head lightly, replying, "No, it's because you decided to listen to your heart." After the children left, the three of them, father, son, and waitress, stayed behind for a few minutes. The boy wanted to show her a new move he had learned, and she watched with genuine admiration as he danced. The father stood nearby, feeling an overwhelming sense of peace. Life had slowed down in the best way possible. It was no longer about deadlines or business deals. It was about moments like this, pure, simple, human moments that money could never buy. As they locked up the studio, the waitress mentioned that the cafe was hosting a small charity event the following weekend. They planned to raise funds to support children with disabilities in the local area. She invited them both to come, suggesting that maybe the dance group could perform there. The idea immediately sparked something in the father's mind. It felt right, a full circle moment. He agreed on the spot. In the days leading up to the event, excitement filled the studio. The children practiced their routines with enthusiasm, and the father helped organize everything, from transport to costumes. The waitress stopped by often to check on their progress, always bringing snacks and encouragement. Her kindness had become a steady presence in their lives, something the father deeply appreciated. The night of the charity event arrived, and the cafe looked more beautiful than ever. Fairy lights hung across the ceiling. The air was filled with the smell of freshly baked pastries, and soft music played in the background. People from all around the community had gathered. The father's heart swelled with pride when he saw his son walk confidently onto the small stage with the other children. When the music started, their movements flowed perfectly, full of joy and spirit. The audience clapped and cheered, and the boy's eyes sparkled brighter than ever before. As the performance ended, the father stood up, overwhelmed by emotion. He realized how much had changed since that first day in this same cafe, the day he saw his son being gently guided through a dance step by a woman who believed in kindness above all else. That one moment had turned into a new life for both of them. When it was time to speak, the father took the microphone. The crowd grew quiet as he began to talk, not as a businessman, but as a father and a human being who had learned something invaluable. He shared the story of how his son had once struggled, how fear had once ruled their days, and how one act of kindness had changed everything. He spoke about the importance of compassion, patience, and seeing people not for their limitations but for their potential. His words were simple but powerful, and many in the audience wiped away tears as he spoke. When he finished, the room erupted in applause. The waitress stood near the back, eyes glistening with emotion, clapping the loudest. The father looked toward her and smiled, knowing she understood that everything he had said came from the heart. It wasn't just a story about dance, it was a story about human connection, about how one person's goodness could light the path for another. After the event ended, the cafe was filled with laughter and conversation. The father helped clean up, despite the waitress insisting he didn't have to. They talked quietly while stacking chairs, sharing stories about their lives. She told him about her younger brother, who had once struggled with confidence, how helping others reminded her of him. The father listened with genuine interest, feeling a deep respect for her strength and empathy. As they stood outside later, the night air cool and gentle, he thanked her once again. "You've changed more than just my son's life," he said. "You changed mine too." She smiled softly, looking up at the stars. "Maybe that's what life is about," she said. "We all just pass kindness around. Sometimes it lands where it's most needed." Those words stayed with him for a long time. In the following weeks, he found himself repeating them whenever he met someone struggling or unsure of their worth. He had started using his influence and resources to support more community projects, scholarships, therapy programs, and inclusive activities for children. The dance studio continued to thrive, but it wasn't just about dancing anymore. It was about giving hope and joy to those who needed it most. His son flourished in this environment. Each day he grew more independent, more self-assured. The father noticed that he was now the one helping other children, guiding them patiently through each dance move, encouraging them the way he had once been encouraged. Watching that filled the father with quiet pride. It reminded him that the best lessons in life were often the simplest ones, the kind that came not from books or business, but from the heart. Every few weeks they still visited the cafe. The routine had become a cherished part of their lives. The waitress always greeted them with her warm smile, and the boy always ran up to her with stories about his latest dance performance. She listened every time with genuine joy, as though each story mattered deeply to her. The father often sat nearby sipping his coffee, content just to watch the exchange. One day he looked around the cafe and noticed how the space had changed too. There were new photos on the wall, pictures from the charity event, snapshots of children dancing, parents cheering, and smiles everywhere. The waitress had framed them herself, she told him, because she wanted everyone who walked in to see the beauty of what kindness could do. The father smiled, realizing how far they had all come. The cafe had once been just a place to grab a cup of coffee. Now it was a symbol, a reminder that life's most meaningful moments often happen in the simplest settings. Months turned into a year, and the bond between them all remained strong. The father never forgot that first moment that started it all, the hesitant dance step, the gentle guidance, and the look of encouragement that had lit up his son's eyes. Every time he thought of it, gratitude filled his heart. One evening, as the sun set over the city, the father stood outside the studio, watching the warm glow spill through the windows. Inside, children danced to soft music, laughter echoing through the hall. His son was leading the group, his movements confident and graceful. The waitress was there too, clapping along with the rhythm. For a moment, everything felt perfectly still, as if life had come full circle. The father thought about the man he had been before all this, driven by ambition, blinded by work, always chasing something he couldn't name. Now he had found what he was looking for, though it wasn't in his wealth or success. It was here in the simple joy and the smiles of children and the warmth of friendship. He walked inside and joined the applause as the music stopped. The children cheered, hugging one another, proud of their performance. The waitress caught his eye from across the room, and they shared a quiet smile that said everything words couldn't. Later, as they locked up and said goodbye, the father lifted his son into his arms. The boy wrapped his arms around his neck and whispered, "I'm happy, Dad." Those words brought tears to the father's eyes. He hugged him tighter, realizing that this happiness was the real treasure he had been searching for all along. As they walked home under the starlit sky, the father glanced back one last time at the dance studio, its lights glowing warmly against the night. He felt a deep sense of peace, knowing that their story, the story that began with a simple act of kindness, would keep touching lives for years to come. And in his heart, he knew one truth that would never fade. Sometimes, the smallest gesture can open the biggest door. One gentle hand guiding a child through a dance step had changed not just a boy's rhythm, but a man's entire life.